There is a split among Republicans whether to denounce or to embrace the lie President Trump told about the election being stolen, a lie that led to violence at the Capitol earlier this month. 1 week after the attack, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said this.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding.
1 week after that, McCarthy changed his tune.
Do you believe that former President Trump provoked?
I don't believe he provoked if you listen to what he said at the rally.
And this week, McCarthy, on a fundraising trip to Florida, met with former President Trump, sending out this photo. Garrett, what do we know about what the two talked about? And particularly for McCarthy, why was this meeting important?
Well, they seem to have agreed that former President Trump is going to be front and center of the House Republicans, at least their attempt to recapture the majority in 2022. We saw this conversation at Mar-a-Lago. Both sides put out statements talking about the former president's centrality to the Republican mission. And look, this is the challenge for Republicans on Capitol Hill from a political perspective. What kind of party do they want to be? There are competing elements here. Do you want to be kind of an old school, small C conservative like Liz Cheney, kind of a deficit hawk, a military hawk? Do you want to try to recast the party as working class, a populist party like a Josh Hawley or a Marco Rubio wants to do? Or do you go full MAGA like a Matt Gaetz, or perhaps what we're seeing here like Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy? I mean, putting Trump at the center of the House Republican plan. We saw that essentially in 2018 when Donald Trump was still president. How it looks in 2022 is anybody's guess, and whether it's a smart bet on the future of the party, I mean, I guess we'll see, but that does seem to be the direction they're going.
Anita, you covered the Trump White House as well. When you look at this meeting, what stands out to you? What's important to understand about the relationship between McCarthy and Trump and the party moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just need to look at the number of votes that President Trump got. Obviously, he lost, but he got 74 million people to vote for him. And yes, a lot of those were Republicans who were going to vote for whoever the Republican candidate was or is. But a lot of them voted for President Trump. They weren't in the party before. They support him. They want him. It's about those votes out there. The Republican Party does not want to lose those votes. They want, them for the midterm elections, like we were just talking about. They see that they could possibly get the House back, and they need President Trump. He has been pretty quiet since he has left Washington, but you've already seen him starting to make some statements, put out some statements from his new office, hire some people. He is going to be vocal. It may not be on Twitter, but it is going to be possibly in interviews and statements and even political events. And so they know he's going to be out there. You're already seeing the people, the Republicans that were opposing him, that voted against him on impeachment, those 10 Republicans facing this enormous backlash back home. And so what they're looking at, what people are looking at is they're looking at the totality of Donald Trump's influence on the party. And they're seeing right now, anyway, it's better to stick with him.
And there is a little bit of a reckoning, we should say, within the entire Republican Party, how to handle members who have embraced dangerous conspiracy theories, even shown support for some violent content targeting Democrats. During Marjorie Taylor Greene's congressional campaign last year, she posted this photo of herself with a gun alongside Democratic members of Congress. Facebook then removed that photo for violating their standards. And this is Greene in video reported on This Week from 2019, following and confronting teenager David Hogg, a survivor of the Parkland school shooting.
Why are you supporting red flag gun laws that attack our Second Amendment rights? And why are you using kids to get as a barrier? He's a coward. He can't say one word because he can't defend his stance, because there is no defense for taking away guns.
Weijia, we learned this week that Greene had shown support online for posts that were calling for violence against Democrats. How are both Republicans and Democrats responding to all this?
Well, it is tricky, right? Because this is such a polarizing figure who you would expect that people would be able to immediately reprimand. But, so far we have seen mixed reactions, and, that is something that both parties, I think, are going to have to reckon with. But I think Garrett, having talked to many of these lawmakers much more often than I do, can speak more to sort of how they're trying to deal with this, because again, from the outside, it seems, the evidence is there. There's no question about what we are seeing and what we are hearing. I will say that the White House and President Biden so far have not weighed in. In fact, they've been pressed about this and have said, we aren't going to say anything because we don't want to fuel anything that has to do with conspiracy theories that are so dangerous to our democracy.
Garrett, what has been the broader response to this, especially among concerns about continued violence? We know that Homeland Security issued a warning about potentially more violence in the weeks ahead in Washington.
Well, look, some Democrats think she's downright dangerous. New member of Congress Cori Bush said she was going to move her office in the Capitol so she wasn't as close to Ms. Greene. Democrats are calling for her to be censured, calling for her to be expelled. But this goes to my larger point earlier about the Republican Party. Republicans have been mostly silent about some of her more controversial statements and behaviors. They're not quite sure what to make of her. There's been no public effort to rebuke her or to change her tune, although NBC, we reported tonight that Kevin McCarthy is going to have some kind of conversation with her about this next week. But even late tonight, Ms. Greene put out a statement really doubling down on her combative style. And this isn't really a surprise. She was like this in Georgia. She was sort of a professional internet troll before she ran for Congress. She won unopposed ultimately after her Democratic opponent dropped out in that race. But she comes from one of the most Republican-leaning districts in the country. She could hold that seat for a very long time, and Speaker Pelosi said this week it's going to be up to Republicans to decide whether or not to rein her in. Democrats will hang every comment she makes around the neck of every Republican in a competitive district come 2022. That I can promise you.
Anita, what does all this mean for President Biden moving forward? There are clear fissures in the Republican Party. There's rising tensions on Capitol Hill. What does that mean for Biden and his agenda?
Well, it just makes it all the more difficult. I mean, even though obviously the Democrats have the House and the Senate by really, really narrow margins, he's got to get some Republicans on board if he wants to pass significant legislation, just not even the coronavirus bill, but just down the road. I mean, he already unveiled a comprehensive immigration bill in his first 24 hours. So he does need to get some of that support, but they are fractured. His own party is somewhat fractured as well. I mean, we're used to both of those things, and it makes it much more difficult for him. It does seem to be that the reality is setting in a little bit. As you see that President Biden is talking about unity, he wants everyone to get on board. You're starting to see that, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer talking about we're going to go it alone. We don't need Republicans. They're not really on the same page here. All the things that President Biden talked about in the campaign, the reality is setting in that he's got to get some things done, particularly on coronavirus. And that might mean they just have to go it alone as much as they can.
Weijia, very briefly, I apologize for a big question in less than a minute, but of course there's an impeachment trial looming. And people have tried to get President Biden to react or weigh in on it. Has he done so?
Well, the furthest that he's willing to go so far is saying that he does think it has to happen, that the trial has to happen because the effect of it not happening would be even worse because, you cannot allow anybody to do what President Trump has done without any consequences. However, he, as we have been talking about all night, has so many things that he needs to get done up on Capitol Hill. It is a time suck, which he has acknowledged himself, saying that he hopes somehow that the lawmakers will be able to split up their workdays to do it all. But this does come right in the middle of really tense negotiations for his number one priority, which is passing that huge stimulus bill. So he hasn't weighed in too much because the White House is very quick to say, look, he is the president of the United States, even though he is the leader of the Democratic Party. Again, he is so focused on trying to bring these two sides together. And, President Trump has a lot of supporters who are upset that he is going through yet another impeachment trial.